All right, is this everybody? All right, so I'm going to let you know the good news and the bad news. The good news is this is the last session of Monday. The good news is that I'm the moderator of this session. I don't know, was that good news and good news? I get confused. All right, fantastic. So, quick background on this session. Never talk to Bing at Southern District and give her a great idea for a session, because then you're the moderator of the session and you have to help organize it. But honestly, it's been fantastic. This came from a conversation we had with one of my engineers at Jacobs. Had just given her very first presentation, and I had talked to her about it and said she'd done a great job, and she went through a lot of the challenges and everything that she went through to get this presentation ready. And it brought back memories for me from doing my first presentation, and it occurred to me, you know what? We need to get more young people to do presentations. So we thought, how do we get young people to do presentations? How do we get management to help encourage that and make it happen? And then also, how do we have not bad presentations? Let's have better presentations. So today, we've got 3 speakers for you. The first one will be Susan Jin, the aforementioned younger engineer from Jacobs. Susan earned her bachelor's degree in civil engineering at Georgia Tech. She stepped into transportation industry through a co-op with Norfolk Southern D, he drove trains for Norfolk Southern. Yeah, so he's an actual engineer. Following that, she worked as a traffic engineer with Jacobs in Midtown for 4 years. Throughout her career, she's worked on multiple retiming projects of Savannah and Augusta's major corridors as a part of the SIGOP Southeast program, and has been working with the signing and marketing team of the 285 Express Lane project. Recently, she's been actively participating in ITE conferences as a committee member, volunteer, and a presenter. In her personal life, she enjoys doing yoga, playing golf, and volunteering, and spending time with her husband, Jin, and their Westie dog. So I will give you Susan. And not me. All right. And that's. And we're up. Oh, didn't take. There we go. Wow.
That's pretty fast.
Patrice Cleater, ladies and gentlemen. My former work partner at Georgia Tech. And if she does it again, I'll tell her what year it was.
Well, thank you, Tom, and thank you everybody for being here. You can tell my age by holding an iPad instead of a piece of paper. If you don't know me, that's okay. This is my second time presenting at a conference, and it's my first time at the summer seminar. And I do plan on coming every year from now on, so get familiar with me. As someone who's quite new to the career and to being a presenter, I thought I'd share how I've been tackling presentation. And you can take this as a summary of inner conversation I had with myself to get to where I am right now. So a little bit of my background in presentation. So I'm just gonna go for the second bullet first. I used to be very self-conscious about speaking in front of people that I didn't know, because I felt anxious not being able to defend myself if I say something wrong or if someone disagrees with me. And I would turn down opportunities to speak in front of people, basically. But I debuted as a speaker at the 2023 Southern District ITE conference, and I call it a debut because it was a big deal. When I was asked to co-present at Southern District, I would have turned it down normally, but something in me got myself to sign up for it. And I still needed many self-encouragements leading up to the presentation, but I survived and I got out, basically. So what was the mental hurdle to overcome and change my mindset towards presenting? basically, the mental hurdle was, first one was presenting was an extra work on top of a real job. So when you think of a job as a transportation engineer coming into the career, you think of like traffic signals, CAD designs, and synchro models. When I got started, it was hard to imagine the world beyond my job description because I would be busy practicing and perfecting the technical skills to be a valuable piece of a team. I learned that some of the most amazing things are done through volunteer hours put in by joining the conference committees and by taking on some volunteer positions within the company. And next one's lack of practice. Lack of practice talking to an audience. Sorry, I'm sort of losing myself. I'm just going to backtrack a little bit. Lack of practice, and this is lack of practice in talking to an audience that you haven't met before. You need a lot of practice in presenting to the group of crowd that you've never met before. It is a lot of daunting steps from preparing your presentation appropriate to the audience to actually being on the stage talking. But you only become comfortable by doing it over and over. Lack of practice could be based on the lack of opportunity, but mostly talking ourselves out of stepping up and being up on the stage. Last thing is lack of confidence. This is coming from inexperience combined with desire to respect attendees' time. We all spend a lot of time and money to come to these conferences, and personally, I thought I had nothing to bring to the table because I'm not experienced enough to showcase anything that would be new or interesting. Because as a young professional, majority of the audience is more senior than I am, and you probably have taught us the things that I'm talking about. So, all right. So why should young professionals present? What made it worth for me to bite the bullet and go for it? These are essentially what I've told myself and what I am telling myself, and what gives me courage to say yes to these offers to present in front of people. So first one's keeping you engaged in the profession through internal and external organizations. Presentation's one of many ways to be involved, but I think it's the most direct way to come to these conferences. All right. Yes, second one, stepping out of the comfort zone. You grow the most through being uncomfortable and meeting people you've never met before. Third one's building your public speaking skills and confidence. So it could be things like how to properly project your voice, how to change and edit content to fit the crowd, how to carry yourself and hide your nervousness. I hope I'm doing a good job. How to sound more professional because you don't always talk like your prepared script. And lastly, how to prepare for questions, expected or unexpected. Next thing is take advantage of being a young professional to make mistakes and learn, because no one expects you to know everything and be perfect, which I think is a huge plus. And this is our chance to make mistakes and improve upon. And then it helps you establish a wider professional reputation. People will know your name and know your face. Lastly, I think this is the best part. It helps you create professional networks and make lifelong friends. All right. So now you're ready to start doing presentations, and how do we get the presentation accepted to the program? First thing is stay aware of professional events and conferences. ITE has a great mailing every month or so that sends you all of the information about the events and conferences, and sometimes requests for abstracts for the conferences. Next one is brainstorm about what you could talk about. When you work on a project, and brainstorm on how that could be turned into a presentation and who would want to hear about it. Third thing is join the technical planning committee of a specific conference or an organization. So for this one, you could join the technical program committee and other technical committees that plan these events. You will learn about topics that are needed in those conferences, and maybe get a speaking spot ahead of time. Lastly, when you get selected, you have been selected for a reason, so be confident and start preparing. All right. Lastly, preparing for opportunities, because opportunities comes to those who are prepared, right? Okay. I'm going to jump around the boxes a little bit, but essentially, both young engineers and senior engineers should work together to support each other for legacy building and retaining knowledge and skill sets. Before all of these, let your supervisor and people around you know that you're trying to begin presenting in the upcoming conferences and meetings, and that would give you a head start in getting a speaking spot. So first thing, go to the meetings and study the content and the delivery of the speakers. It could be things like presentation topics and the depth of the presentation. If it was easy or difficult to understand, you can take all of these and apply it to your own presentation. Next thing is rehearse your presentation many times. Maybe spare 10 minutes at the end of the team meeting and dry run your presentation. Utilize your support system. Seek out mentorship in ITE, other professional organizations, your work, etc. Next thing, and talk to your supervisor and project managers about potential speaking topics. And senior folks, if someone in your team expressed they would like to present on a work, you could support us by throwing us some speaking topics. Lastly, co-present. This could be an amazing opportunity for training. Co-present with people who have shown interest in presenting in the future so that they could enter the field slowly with your guidance. All right, this is all I have prepared. I hope to see more new faces as a speaker. Thank you.
All right, I'm looking worse every minute. Let's see. Our next presenter, who's going to talk about mentoring, and he's got a long history of mentoring. I remember when I was a young engineer, first starting. I got a job at a small company called Street Smarts, and there was a senior engineer sat right next to me in the next office over, and he was ever so helpful at telling me to stop goofing around and get more work done. His name was John Karnowski. He is a PE, PTOE, AICP, LMNOP. He is a graduate of Georgia Tech. He began managing people early in his career while just a kid himself. All right. He began working at the city of Roswell in 1988, then in consulting engineering in 1994. He's currently the National Director of Traffic Services at NV5, a publicly traded engineering firm. He's been an active member of ASHI, ITS Georgia, ITS Carolinas, and ITE, having served as the section president in 2012. He's also the chair of the Gwinnett Transit Advisory Committee. In his career, he has completed thousands of traffic studies, designed hundreds of traffic signals, and completed timing plans for nearly that many signals. He's worked on projects in almost every state, most of the larger provinces in Canada, and more recently, projects in Mexico and Australia. John is the husband of Peggy and father of one son and two married daughters, no grandkids yet. And we have the slide for I didn't make a PowerPoint presentation for John. John Karnowski.
Just going to read this book. All right, well, I'm looking out and I'm just wondering what kind of mix of people we have here. How many of y'all either currently or have in the past managed somebody else? Just been a supervisor. Wow, so that's most of you, right? So everything Susan just talked about, she was really talking to the younger folks or those maybe who haven't even branched out and done presentations. But I really want to talk for a moment to you, those who raised your hands, you supervisors, you managers of other people, you people who are supposed to be mentoring other folks. You know, we heard from Susan, why the young people should make presentations, but I want to ask you, why should we, as principals, as managers, as leaders, should we be actively encouraging our people to do it? Why should we be doing this? And there are 3 reasons. There would be more reasons, but Larry Overn would leave after 3, so I'm just going to say, just going to keep it to 3. So, yeah, he's going to leave after 1, right? So, first of all, it's good for the organization. Now, it doesn't really matter whether you're a consulting firm, or you're a supplier, you're in public service, in a government agency. There is value to the organization. Name recognition. And if you're in public sector, you're like, what do I need name recognition for? But let's just say that you are a consultant, and here's how the name recognition goes. You're just like, I saw Susan do this presentation at a Chamber of Commerce meeting, and well, you know what? Here's a big fat contract for you. Here you go, Susan. Or the city of Cary, North Carolina. If you guys are familiar with Cary, they're a very forward-thinking agency. They are always giving presentations at ITE or something about their latest projects that they're doing. I want to go work for them because they're just this forward-thinking agency. I've heard about your new radar detector equipment at a presentation last year. I heard you make that at, say, ITS Georgia. Here's an order for 1,000 new units, and can we get those next month? Whatever agency or industry that you're in, name recognition is important. And having somebody out there as a ambassador for your company is key. It increases your staff's competency. Susan talked about confidence, and I love that. But confidence actually builds competency. There was a famous author, Michael Gelb. I don't know if you've read any of his stuff, but he said, by stretching yourself beyond your perceived level of confidence, you accelerate the development of your competence. I'll say that again. By stretching yourself beyond your perceived level of confidence, you accelerate your development of your competence. And you guys are managers and supervisors. Isn't that what you want for your people? You want, more competency, right? So stretch them beyond that. It improves employee retention. Okay, so we all know that millennials and Gen Zs and whatever you call yourselves these days, I don't know, that they, the number one thing that they want is work-life balance. But the number 2 thing, the thing that's really close behind it, if you ask any of the surveys or the internet, because that's always right, what is it that they want? And they want a company that promotes learning and development opportunities. And so that's what this is. It also engenders trust. When you say, I want you to go and make these presentations, I think you would be good at that. It engenders trust. It shows that you care about their development. And so for the organization, it just builds better employees. Now, it's also good for the employee. We just heard Susan speak about this. There's a Roman philosopher, again, this is from the internet, so who knows, named Seneca. And Seneca used the Latin phrase, docendo decimus. And I don't speak Latin, so hopefully that's great. Anybody here speak Latin? Whatever. It says, the best way to learn is to teach. And when you do a presentation, whether it's on, I don't know, some technical whiz-bang thing, you're going to learn it more just by the virtue of having to teach it to other people. Yeah, you may have learned it in your job and what you're doing, but think how much more you have to research, that you have to be confident of what you say when you speak to other people. And so the best way to learn is to teach. Docendo decimus. I'm just trying to impress you with my Latin. So many years ago, I actually entered the ITE paper competition. We haven't done a paper competition in a while. Why is that? Robinson, get on that. Okay. But we used to have ITE paper competition, and so I entered. I had been learning about saturation flow rates. This is in 1995, and using saturation flow rates to calibrate traffic analysis. And it's important to calibrate your analysis. If you didn't know that, that's another presentation, and somebody else can do that. So I did this. I wrote this paper about a way to do that in the field, and I wrote it and presented it and stuff like that. It built confidence in myself that I actually could do something like that. And I was a pretty young engineer at the time. Contrary to what Tom said, he's actually much older than me. So I was young at it, but I started to get more involved in IT as a result of that. You know, the prize for being first in paper competition, yeah, that had something to do with me wanting to do it. But I kind of put myself out there in order to see if I could do it. And I think I won like honorable mention or something throwaway, but it didn't really matter. I enjoyed the process. So it increased my confidence. It improves the communication skills. Susan and I were just talking about this beforehand. I've been in drama and theater since I was a kid. I have no problem speaking in front of people as a character. Dress me up as Romeo and I could probably do that. It's a lot different when you have to speak about something you know, right? It's one thing to take on the character of somebody else, but to speak as you know, I mean, that's you, that's raw. So it certainly does help to take these opportunities to do that. When I speak in schools, when I go to middle schools or high schools, the teachers inevitably will ask me, what is the, am I done? Is that right? Okay. What is the number one skill that engineers should have? And I know they're just prompting me to say, oh, math or science, take calculus in high school or something. But I always say the same thing. I said, you need to have great communication skills. And it's true. How many of y'all have had really great engineers come through who could just absolutely ace any test at Georgia Tech that they threw at them, but then they got into the work environment and they couldn't talk at all? I mean, they couldn't talk in meetings, they couldn't communicate their ideas, they couldn't write. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. Lisa's going to tell you about that in a minute. But they need good communication skills because we are really smart people, but nobody knows that if we can't communicate our ideas. And so that's what's really important, whether it's by written or by some sort of presentation or our plan sets. It's all about communication. Okay, so how do we get them to do this? Let's start with a safe environment. The office is a safe environment. So here's a good example. We have a very large group that's spread across the country. And so we have staff meetings only once every 2 weeks. And we rotate who's going to run that staff meeting. And we have this kind of the normal stuff that they have to go through. But then they've got 10 minutes or maybe 15. Some talk a little slower. And they can talk about anything. They can talk about a project they've worked on. They could talk about a new trick they learned in Synchro or in AutoCAD or something like that. But they've got 10 minutes to be part of themselves and present to the group. And it gives them confidence that, other people value what they have to say. So we have them lead a staff meeting. I have them join a committee within the company. We have this employee resource group in our company. It's a big company. And people join that to be part of it. Maybe they make presentations in that. Or they join the fun committee. I know, you'd want to do the fun committee, right? And everybody wants to do the fun committee. But they join the fun committee, and they're encouraging their coworkers to do something fun. Maybe it's shorts and Sundays on a Thursday afternoon in the hot summer. But whatever it is, it gets them out of their comfort zone. We talked about comfort zone, didn't we? Yeah. So, but here's the thing. You need to fund their activities. Oh, no. That's hard. I got to put money towards this? Yeah, you need to fund this. You need to fund them coming to here. You need to fund them being part of professional organizations. You need to put in your budget. And for some of your companies, it's going to be radical. Don't make them make up all the time just because they go to a meeting. Don't make them have to work all that time that they spent going away. Put it in your budget. Understand that that's just going to be part of their utilization. That's for the consultant people out there, not the public sector. But I know that's radical, and some of the companies are like, John, shh. Sorry. But you know what? Here's a great example of funding it. You see those two little ladies, Heath and Lineback ladies? Raise your hand. Right, I met them last night. Okay, I'm going to pick on you. I told you last night I might pick on you, right? They're from Heath and Lineback. Have you guys ever seen anybody here from Heath and Lineback? No. You know why? Well, because this is perceived as a traffic thing, and they don't do traffic. These ladies I asked them last night, how did you guys come here? First of all, they're young. They're only a couple years out of school, right? Yeah, they're only a couple years out of school. You know what they told me? They asked. That was it. They saw some sort of flyer and they asked. And so they ran up the flagpole, I guess. Warren Dimsdale is their supervisor, and he said yes. I guess other people said yes, and they got to come. Heath and Lineback funded these two highway engineers to come to what's perceived as a traffic fund for the first time, I don't know, ever maybe, that Heath and Lineback is represented here. Now, what does that say about that company? What does it say to them about that company? I mean, how much more loyal are they towards that company as a result of being able to come here? Are you guys having fun? Yeah, you're having fun. They played cornhole last night, right? Well, play, yes. They threw the cornhole. Right. So I think that's awesome. And I think that's what we should be doing. And the whole reason I agreed to even come up here is so that I could preach as the old guy, do this, and fund it, and encourage your people to do that. Maybe even make it part of their review process. I don't know. You could do that. Hey, you know what? If you want a good review next year, be part of a professional organization. Be active in it. Join a committee. Speak at doing this presentation. For that, I'm going to let Lisa talk.
All right, thanks, John. Didn't see that coming. Nice job. No, really. All right, our next speaker is a Dr. Lisa Rosenstein, or we'll just go with Lisa. Some of you know her because you had her as your professor, and I was reading her bio and realized I missed her. I mean, I got out when she came in. So, my hope for this is that whoever's got presentations in here tomorrow is going to hear her talk and go, nailed it. My fear is there are going to be some people in their hotel room going, oh no. So Lisa Rosenstein earned her BA in English. English?
All English all the way.
Wow. I don't think we've ever had an English major here. From Connecticut College and her PhD in English from Emory University. She's currently the principal academic professional in the School of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Georgia Tech. In CEE, Lisa serves as the director of the Charles E. Gearing Program in Engineering Communication, which she created in 1998. If you can't find a good job, make a good job. In addition to her academic duties, Lisa has consulted for many years with the CDC and several other local engineering firms. If you haven't heard from her before, I think you're in for some rude awakening. And if you have heard from her before, don't go to sleep, because she's grading you still. All right.
I don't think so. I need the full screen here.
I'm really bad at this. There we go.
Oh, I don't want, oh, okay.
It's up.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. There will be no grading. When we were putting this presentation together, once the panel was formed, we were deciding how we were going to manage our time and what we were going to do. And we decided with an hour and a half, we only wanted to take 30 minutes, 10 minutes apiece, so we could have most of the time for group discussion. And I thought, my goodness, what can I teach that really matters in 10 minutes? So I didn't come up with this. This is a skill I teach to my students all the time, and I have for 25 years. It's a little abbreviated for 10 minutes, but it's a skill that what I really wanted to call this was the presentation strategy that will change your life. But that's a lot of words for one person out of three. So it is a skill that I think is absolutely central to the success of anybody's presentation. like I said, I have 10 minutes. I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to reel off 50 things that you should do. That would be useless. So this is the one skill I truly believe if you can incorporate this into your presentation, into your delivery, it'll go a long way to really improving the quality of the talk. So it is called Talking an Audience Through Graphical Evidence. The overview of this very short presentation is, first I will start with the motivation, basically the motivation for me even addressing this topic. I will then go through the causes of poor descriptions or explanations, and I'll ask a couple questions of you about why you think this happens, because I have seen, and I'm sure you have too, a lot of people do not such a great job when they have graphical evidence. They don't know what to do with it, basically, and so we'll talk about why that happens. I want to give you an approach which is different from the speaking strategy I'm going to recommend. Basically, how do you approach this task of talking an audience through a graphic? Once you have the approach, what is the actual strategy? I've brought only one graphic. That's my 10-minute limit. Usually when I teach this to a class, I'll have a series of graphics. But I've just brought one to show you what I mean. Basically, I want to model good behavior to you. I want to show you what it should look like, and then offer you some conclusions. So here's the motivation, and I'm sure this will resonate with many of you. So as you know, technical presentations contain a lot of graphical evidence. That's not news to you. In my experience, perhaps in yours, one common deficiency I see, and you have probably seen too, is a speaker's inability to adequately explain or describe or explain these graphics. And what I mean by that, it would be a speaker who's standing up here with the remote mouse, and they're just doing, here's a graph of, click, here's a table of, and they're clicking and clicking and clicking, and the things they're just flicking on the screen, and you're thinking to yourself, why are you doing this? I'm not getting any of this. And the data is probably really good, and the data they're showing is probably really meaningful, but you as an audience are getting none of it because they're going too fast and they're not doing anything useful with it. And to me, and I see a lot of nods out there, this can seriously undermine the quality of a technical presentation. So why do I think this happens? This is my experience, this is my conjecture, and I certainly welcome comments from you. And you can push me over the 10-minute line if it comes from you guys. These three I clicked on together because they're sort of all wrapped up together, and I've got one more that's sort of separate and apart. So I believe that people just do this clicking and clicking and clicking and not doing anything with it because there's this false perception that the audience just gets it, that we're all engineers, we're all in the same business, we all know what we're looking at. So obviously they would just get it, and then moving on to that second bullet, if they just get it, why would I talk about it? Because then I would waste their time, and nobody wants to waste anybody's time. That's the last thing anybody wants to do. And then wrapped up with that is the false belief, I think it's false belief, that going right to the interpretation is being efficient. And that's what we all want to do. We don't want to waste people's time. We want to get to the point. We want to all be efficient. If they don't get it, if you're just clicking through, no one's getting it, you're wasting their time in a different way than you thought you were, and you're not at all being efficient. And then the second one, and this might resonate with some of you also, is that you as a speaker never intended to spend time on the graphic to begin with, that you knew it was in there, but you didn't really want to talk about it. If you don't really want to talk about it, if you don't intend to talk about it, don't include it. And this also includes those slides that have one little graphic in the bottom left-hand corner or the bottom right-hand corner that is not part of what you really want to talk about. You want to talk about everything else on the slide, and you just sort of ignore that thing in the corner. It might have been an old slide from a different presentation, and that thing in the corner wasn't really relevant, or you might have grabbed the slide from somebody else because it had some good data at the top, but you didn't really need the bottom. If you don't talk about it, you know what's going to happen in Q&A, right? Could you go back to slide 15? I didn't understand, that, You just think, I didn't talk about it. And precisely, you didn't talk about it, and that's why they're asking the question. So if you have no intention of talking about something, get it out of your presentation. Briefly, is there anything else anyone knows or can think of or can enlighten me on of why you think that people don't do this particularly well? I generally think it's the top three all wrapped up together. Okay. So, what's the approach? And again, this isn't the strategy. So, what is the approach? So, when you are a speaker, you have to think about what the audience wants to know, because you need to satisfy their needs. I mean, that's your goal as an audience member. So if I threw a graphic up on the screen right now, you'd never seen it. Just it's out of your knowledge base. I throw it up there. What's the first simple question you think to yourself when you see it? I click the thing, and you say to yourself, with some version of that. What is it? What is it? All right. So then I would say, well, it's just something. I say, oh, okay. Now I know, at least I know what it is. Then what do you say? It's like, okay, how do I read it? What's the red stuff? I don't know what the red is. What's the purple stuff? What are your abbreviations? How do I read this thing? Do I start at the top? I have a graphic. When I teach my students, you actually have to start reading it in the middle and then kind of work your way out. And that's not intuitive. And then once you know what it is and how to read it, then you want to know, okay, what does it mean? What should I take out of this? If this is what an audience wants to know, you've got your job description. You'll never have a better job description in your life. If they want to know what it is, you as a presenter, you need to identify it. And all the verbs are underlined here, so you know what to do. That's what a good job description is verbs. Do this, and do this. You have to identify it. If they want to know how do I read it, you've got to familiarize them with it. This is what the red is. You start reading here. You go top to bottom. This is what the units are, if you've never seen the abbreviation for the units. And then everyone's like, oh, okay, now I got it. And only then is your audience set up to understand what it is it means, what's the explanation. So this is your job description. Identify it, familiarize people with it, and only then explain it. That's the approach. So what's the strategy? What I want you to do is say these words, all right? When the graphic comes up, you say, what you are looking at is, and you go on. At this point, I can't tell you how much pushback I get from students. I get the this, I get the eye roll, I get a lot of stuff. I get a lot of stuff. And the basic question is, can I just say, this is? Can I just say that? And my answer is always the same. I'm sorry, I can't see you guys. That my answer is always the same, which is, if you can remember, under the stresses and anxieties of giving a presentation, and it can be enormously stressful and anxiety-inducing for a lot of people, if you can remember how to finish that sentence the way you want to finish it, be my guest. But how many of you, and I'll put my hand up to answer my own question, how many of you have had the experience of giving a presentation and you've put it together and you've rehearsed it and you've done everything you're supposed to do, and you stand up in front of the audience and you start talking about things you never intended to say? And the other half of your brain is saying, why are you saying this? You didn't rehearse this. Stop talking, and you just keep going. That's what I'm talking about. So basically, this is a little bit of a fail-safe strategy. If you start the sentence, what you are looking at is, the chances of ending up where you want to be are pretty good. They're just pretty good. And it'll get you where you want to. So what you're looking at is, it's like, okay. And then for the explanation part, and I know there's only 2 here, and there were 3 on the previous slide. I'll explain that in a second. What I want you to notice is, and that gets at the explanation. And again, why would you say that? Because if you use those introductory words, the chances of ending up in the place where you want to end up are pretty good. So I really recommend that. I never recommend anyone trying to memorize a script of the presentation. That's just a recipe for disaster. But to memorize these couple phrases, I think that's okay. Now, as you can see, and you can do the math faster than I can, there were three things here: identify, familiarize, and explain, whereas here there's only 2. So here's where the critical judgment comes in. What's left out of this is the familiarization. This is a judgment call. If you are speaking to people who you are pretty sure know exactly what they're looking at in terms of how to read it anyway, perhaps they don't know your specific data display, but they know the units you're working with. They've seen the type of graphic that you use. You don't need to familiarize them with a graphic, and especially perhaps if you're talking within your own firm or within your own group, everyone knows how to read it. That's a judgment call. You either keep it in or you keep it out. You'll know, believe me, you'll know if you made the right call. That'll become patently clear to you. If not in the moment when you're doing it, where people are, you see their faces, it'll become apparent at the end where, the hand creeps up. Could you go back to slide 15? And you think, ugh, if I had just familiarized them with it, we wouldn't be here. I would have obviated the need for that question. But that's a total judgment call. You might win some, you might lose some on that. But I can get you into it, what you are looking at is, and then what I want you to notice. And it's a great strategy. All right, so here's the one graphic that I brought. It's a simple one. All the ones that I typically use for my students, they're simple. It doesn't require any special engineering expertise. But this one does a lot of things that are useful for me. So let me show you what I want you to do, what I would recommend that you do when you have a graphic. So what you are, and by the way, I'm going to interrupt myself too, to just sort of comment on what I've done. So here we go. What you are looking at is a graphic that shows the monthly contributions of the 2 principal tributaries to the total Nile River flow. I'm going to stop right there. One of the reasons I choose this one is it's a mouthful of a title. And some of you have mouthful title slides, which is fine, which in my world are called noun strings. But anyway, you have mouthfuls of titles. And I've seen people who are hesitant to talk that whole thing through because it's just a lot of words. But if I don't say that, if I jump right to the data, where are you as an audience member? You're still stuck at the top, reading the title, and we are, 2 seconds into the graphic, and we're already at a disconnect. 2 seconds in, and I'm in a different place than you're in. That's not a good start. So what did it take me, 4 seconds, maybe 3 seconds to say the title? You're not wasting anybody's time, all right? So what you are looking at is the monthly contributions of the 2 principal tributaries to the total Nile River flow. As you can see, the White Nile is represented by the white bars intuitively, and the Blue Nile represented by the blue cross-hatched bars. Along the x-axis, you can see months of the year, starting in January on the left. Oh, it's cut off. Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
It got cut. It's cut off. Oh, darn. It's cut off. There's a x-axis label, and it's there's a y-axis label, and it says BCM, billion cubic meters. Oh, that's just too bad. Thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't load it. Because I have a thing to talk about the y-axis. Anyway, there is a y-axis label, and it was billion cubic meters per month. But anyway, all right, I'm going to stop right there. did it insult anyone or bother anyone that I talked about the white and the blue, even though there's only two colors? No, it's helpful. It's just helpful. Did anyone think when I said January, months of the year starting in January, did anyone think, oh, when does she think the calendar starts? No, I did it intentionally because I'm going to ultimately make a seasonal argument because I need it to start at the beginning of the calendar year, because it wasn't when the project started, it wasn't when the funding started, it's really I need the calendar. And then I was going to say, I assumed you didn't know what billion cubic meters, I assumed you didn't know the units, and so that's why I talked you through them, but there was a y-axis label. All right, so now you're set up. Now you're set up. And at this point, I can go anywhere I want with this. What I want you to notice is that the total monthly contributions from both tributaries is much greater in the second half of the year than the first half of the year. What I want you to notice is, I could reverse that, the monthly contributions collectively are much smaller in the first half. What I want you to notice is the variation in contributions is much greater in the Blue Nile than the white. I mean, it can go anywhere, but the point is that you've set the audience up for whatever it is you want to tell them. All right, so that's the strategy that I want you to use. So my quick conclusions, please acknowledge that your audience needs to be guided through the graphics and that just clicking through is not doing anybody any favors. Determine how much familiarization they need, and again, you know, it's not a foolproof method, but go with what you truly believe would be the most appropriate way to proceed. Go slowly and be confident that this is time well spent. Thank you very much. Blue Nile.
I didn't know there were two tributaries, that was one marked as a white and one marked as a blue.
I took this from a colleague in water resources at Tech.
Oh, okay.
Okay, now for the interesting part. You guys get to ask questions, make comments, tell stories if you'd like. But I'm going to start off. So one of the things that I think, John, you pointed out was a lot of the benefits and the upside of getting people to speak, do presentations, write papers. What, besides funding, what's a downside that might be perceived by folks?
Well, I think it's a perception, but my employee's going to leave if everybody knows who they are. Somebody's going to try and steal them. They're going to, oh, look, they make a presentation, and oh, they're valuable. We should hire them. Like, hey, give them your card at the end. And by the way, Susan, we need to talk after this. I mean, yeah, that could happen. But honestly, if you care about your employees and you care about the profession as a whole, that really shouldn't be your driving factor. I will tell you that I've had people who did do exactly that. They came and they spoke at ITE, and a few months later, they were gone because 4 companies came to try to hire them. And you know what? I'm actually very happy for them. They are doing very well. And if I wasn't providing what they needed, then they should find something else. So I was happy for them. I mean, I'm not going to stand in anybody's way of becoming successful. So I think that's a perception. I think better is that they're going to stick around, that they're going to find that they have value within their company or their agency.
Awesome.
And I dare anybody to debate me on that one.
All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Are you going to debate me?
Graphic presentation, but verbiage presentation. Should I get over that it makes me crazy that there's three or four sentences that just take up and you can't even read them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue here is that a lot of people don't believe that there are standard practices and standards of excellence for slides. That it's easy for people to believe that writing matters, and you know good writing, and you know that there's bad writing, but slides, they're kind of fun, you know, you just, you know, you grab pictures, and it just seems easier, and if it seems easier, that sort of translates into less rigor, and so people will do whatever they want. So I think the importance is to make people understand that there are standard practices, and what you're describing does not meet the standard practice of what a slide should be. And that, you know, and finding examples. I mean, if you just do a simple internet search, pretty much everyone says the same thing. You know, you don't clutter up your slides and all of that. So it's not that hard to find standard practices and standards of excellence, but you have to acknowledge that they exist first.
Thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. So especially looking at the last graphs that you put on the screen, I kind of have a different idea about the graph, you know, the two tributaries, the White Nile and the Blue Nile, but that's besides the point. The point I'm trying to make is that you can prepare all kinds of, you know, graphics, presentations, all kinds of stuff, but I think you spoke about knowing the audience is very important. And you can have such interesting graphics and whatnot, but in their mind, in the audience mind, they have specific things that they want to know. You can talk about what they need to know, what you think is the facts, the graphics, you know, all kinds of, you know, stuff you can present. How much time do you think a presenter should spend to kind of, you know what the audience wants to know? Not the needs. The need and the want is kind of, there is a difference between the two. You can talk about the facts, but how much time do you think a presenter should spend to kind of, you know, dig into what exactly they want to know besides the facts?
That sounds like a little bit of mind reading to me. I mean, as a presenter, you have your job, which is to, obviously, I would think, come up with new, interesting, engaging information that is relevant to the people who have come to hear you speak. I don't know if you can particularly know what they want to know. I think that if you meet your responsibilities if you present them with that kind of information competently and coherently. And then, you know, that's what Q&A is for. They'll tell you what they want during Q&A if you haven't provided it. And that's where, and that's another presentation strategy, is learning how to manage Q&A. That's a whole other issue, you know, because there's someone who can monopolize, the Q&A and things like that. But I think what you're asking is what happens during Q&A.
Something I've struggled with presentations, and I've seen other people struggle with, is taking a graphic from a report and just copying and pasting it, especially like a very complicated results graph that just has no business being on a presentation. There's no possible way they could go through all the numbers. Sometimes you can't even read it.
Right.
I was just wondering if that's something you've seen, and if you had any advice on either if it's even worth trying to simplify, or if it's just start over with something different, or like what general tips.
I do see it all the time. So if you have a graphic that's basically what you're describing is unreadable, it's just unreadable, but it has important, and it has important information. Is that correct? In its current format, it's unreadable, but it has important information. So question, would blowing it up, if it's a table, would just blowing it up help? That's a simple answer. Can you modify? Can you can you extract some of the data, create your own modified table, and tell the audience you have modified this from its original format with the relevant data? So can you create a new table? So you have to have good skills yourself to create a nice table. So those are two options. The third option, and I do this with my students, is what if you can't do either one of those things? What if you just have a lousy graphic to work with? Just terrible. But that's all you've got. You like, I feel like I'm talking about telling a 2-year-old how to behave. You do, you say it, but you use your powers of description really, really well. And again, if I had a lot more time, I've got a bunch of lousy graphics that if you look at them, you know, and I would say, what is it to everyone? There would be a collective shrug. But by the end, if I describe it, so you can actually say, okay, this is not good, but if we take our time, I can talk you through it. So that's a third option. Now, if it's just too small and you can't do that, you would have to blow it up and then talk us through it. But to me, even the worst graphic, the speaker can accommodate, can make up for it by really explaining it slowly and coherently. Does that help at all? Okay.
If you want examples, watch Fox Five.
Hey, Dr. Rosenstein.
Oh, hello.
Hey.
Another one of my students.
Yeah. What's some of your cardinal sins for just slide creation?
Oh, boy. For slide, you know, a million different colors, too many words, just cluttered. Animation. Most people have stopped doing that. That was a thing when people first started with PowerPoint, but people have calmed down generally since then. So cluttered, colors, animation, that's on a font size. Those are the big ones. I mean, can anyone think of the other things? I mean, is that pretty much it?
I think it's true with traffic engineering as well. I always call it the yard sale syndrome, where
Yeah.
somebody gets the biggest piece of paper in their house, and they draw it as big as they can, yard sale, and they're like, this is awesome, and they put it on the side of the road and you can't see it. And that nobody realizes how big traffic lights and signs are. So when something's up on a PowerPoint, you know, you did it in 10-point font, well, it's not gonna show up. You really need to be out there and think about it. And there's a reason that PowerPoint defaults to 24-point.
So what do you think is? What are the worst sort of PowerPoint sins you've seen?
Oh, man. Yeah, like if the background and the font are like really meshing in together. Yeah.
Don't choose those PowerPoint backgrounds. They're no help to you. No, they really aren't.
And then one more question. How do you handle the Q&A if something you're unprepared for? You get a
So
question
if you don't know the answer?
Yeah.
Okay, if you don't know the answer, the first thing you say is, that's a wonderful question, so compliment them and say, I don't know the answer. Do not try and tap dance your way out of this, okay? Because very often, when they are asking, they know the answer. You know that, and they're just trying to corner you. So if you don't know the answer, compliment them. That's an excellent question. Thank you very much. I do not know the answer to that. And then you offer after the session to help them find, you know, I will look that up and give me your contact information and I will get the answer to you. But don't try and pretend you know when you don't know. That's the worst route possible.
For Tom all the time.
It's your go-to?
So I have a quick question. If you have too much of a list of things in one slide, you split it into 2 different slides, and go back and forth, or just try to fit everything in one slide?
Oh, well, you know, it depends. So if you have a list, first of all, it's one of the few times that I potentially recommend animating text. Because if you have a list, people are going to read the list much more quickly than you can say the list. And if you don't want them to get ahead of you, that's a really good reason to animate, to bring things in one at a time. So that helps with the cluttering. Where'd you go? That helps. That helps with the cluttering issue. if you bring them in one at a time. And then you can sort of get fancy too. I don't know how fancy you want to get. Have you ever seen people gray out the ones that, you know, either way. But at that point, it doesn't matter if it's on one slide or two slides. The number of slides becomes irrelevant because you're not overwhelmed either way.
Hi, this question is for John and Susan. So, John, I know we talked about people or younger employees that want to get into speaking or engage, and then giving them that opportunity. But there are some who just aren't interested in it, or it's just very anxiety-inducing for them. And so, how do you motivate them or like encourage them to get out of their shell? You know, as engineers, a lot of us are introverts and we hate public speaking. So, how do you help them with that? And then, Susan, what are some of the things that you do to kind of calm your anxiety, like you mentioned, when you're preparing to speak, or even in like these networking type of events to control, you know, when you're networking, that social anxiety that a lot of us feel sometimes?
Yeah, I shouldn't have said make people, but yeah, I mean, you can't make anybody do presentations. However, being part of the profession doesn't have to involve making a presentation. How many people here are on the technical committee and not speaking? Anybody? There's a few. How many people are part of the conference and aren't part of anything that's up here? I know there's a lot of people that are doing other things on the conference, right? I mean, there's lots of ways you can be involved, and you get to be part of the committee meetings. You get to know other people that are on the committee, either through Zoom or maybe stuffing bags, right, Bing? Do y'all still do that? Yeah. So there's lots of ways to be involved, whether it's speaking or not, and that's really the point. I have plenty of people that I've managed who would never get up here and speak, and I would never make them. But I would encourage them to be involved in some sort of professional capacity.
For calming anxiety and everything, I'm still very anxious. If I looked not anxious, I'm very flattered. I think trying to be comfortable with the audience and think of them as, I don't know, not so strangers, helps a lot in being, you know, sort of calm and collected when I speak in front of people and extremely anxious. And in networking, I've gotten better in throughout the time I've actively started networking. Before that, I was one of those introverts that just wouldn't go to those events and everything. Just like, I guess, knowing that everybody has one purpose of get to know each other, sort of build network, lets you be comfortable to the setting, having a few pickup lines. I don't know if that's a proper way. Having a few pickup lines helps a lot. So yeah, those things.
Don't let her fool you. She's absolutely totally calm up here. Like, you'll have a little shake going on. None of that. She was standing over there, not one shake.
I'm shaking.
Yeah. See?
Thanks, Andy. You made the list. Okay, I was thinking about Susan and her preparing for this. So one of the things that she did was we had our monthly traffic meeting, and she presented basically her presentation and had a run at it, had a practice run inside of a relatively safe space. We did give her a hard time about it, but it's heckling. You have to learn this when you're going to be a stand-up. The other thing is that she sent her presentation to me. She sent it to several other people to have them review it. One of the other resources that a lot of companies have is graphic design people. My wife is a marketing person. So a lot of you know who my wife is. She works for Chick-fil-A, and she said I am the absolute worst at making presentations. So when I had to do a presentation for the American Public Works Association, I called up one of our graphic designers and said, hey, do you have like 15 minutes to like format this thing and make it look like a 4-year-old didn't do it? They said, fine. It got not only formatted, but it was in our company format, so the logo was correct and the slides actually transitioned. it was great. So there are resources at your companies that I think need to be made available to everybody so that, you know, when you're up here and your company logo's on that presentation, you're presenting for the company. And the company definitely wants it to look good. You know, you don't want to put something up where I took a screenshot of it off of their website and put it up and it's real grainy and it looks terrible, so. Carla?
I've seen this done by a lot of speakers. I've never done it before, but they'll tell a joke or they'll do something like that prior to them getting into their presentation. What do you think about that kind of stuff?
A joke?
I'm the what not to do for her entire presentation.
No, these are professional conferences. They're not Toastmasters. They're not, you're not emceeing anything. My recommendation is to not tell a joke.
Yes, sir.
Hello. So I wanted to thank you very much for what you presented, Lisa, John, and Susan. I appreciated everything. So everything that was talked about was more about the visual aspects, at least most of them about the visual aspects of presentation. So there are these types of, some subjects are very interesting, at least in my point of view, but the presenter presents it that I go to sleep. And on the other side of the spectrum, that the subject's not so catchy, but the presenter talks about it so nicely that keeps you engaged. So that's how, the presenter talks about it. A good example is John, so kudos to you. I really like how you present your stuff. So basically wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts about that? So some people talk, I don't know, some people may make a joke, which relevant joke or a funny comment on their presentation, so that people are like lively.
That gets at the issue. Again, I had 10 minutes and I had to choose a very small topic to talk about. But when I teach presentations, I make sure students understand to look at presentations as 3 categories. So there's the content, the actual the thing you're talking about, and then the delivery, which is what you're talking about, the delivery, and then the slides. So it's the content, delivery, and slides. And so when I teach students about presentations, I don't just talk about presentations, we talk about these different aspects. What I showed you was an aspect of the slides. I have to assume that the content they bring to me is basically true and good and beautiful. And then we get to delivery. How do you teach delivery is kind of what you're asking. And what do you do if someone has absolutely 0 delivery skills? There's a lot of different things that can go wrong with delivery. There can be someone who is, which is not you, but you brought up anxiety, but you can have people who are just crippled by anxiety. I mean, I had a student once who opened her mouth and absolutely nothing came out. I mean, just, and then the students was, they just talking, and that's the best they could do. There's students who you're talking, I think what you're getting at, sometimes people are just a monotone and they're not even aware that they speak in a monotone. They have no idea how to modulate their voice. They don't know how to pause or break, or they don't, so it's just one long stream, which could put you to sleep. So there's a variety of delivery issues that could hamper a presentation. So the answer to that, you're not going to like it too much because it's a kind of a vague answer. You have to figure out what's the delivery problem. And we're speaking abstractly, so I can't say what it is, but you would have to figure out what is the delivery problem, and then that has to be addressed. And it could be one of a variety of things. But you're right, that can absolutely undermine the effectiveness of a presentation the same way poor graphics can undermine it. It's going to be one of those things. Is your content weak and people just attack it left, right, and center? Is the delivery weak, people go to sleep? Or the graphics completely incomprehensible and you've just lost everybody? I mean, it's like a minefield, But I would say if you're thinking of someone who really needs to work on delivery, you've got to first diagnose what the delivery issue is.
Tom, I got a question for Susan. Susan, who taught you presentation skills at Georgia Tech?
Dr. Lisa Rosenstein.
Yeah, after it's too late for me. Yes, sir.
I'm trying to think how to phrase this, but with executive management, you don't have that time. You're trying to convey a complex problem or a complex infographic to them. Is there a catchphrase that you would suggest to indicate this is going to take some time for me to explain, to kind of set them, kind of the reverse of what you're saying when it's under those time frames?
If it's complicated, you have to, lay your cards out and say, look, this is, now you brought up infographic, which is a specific type of graphic, but let's just call it any kind of graphic. You say, look, this is complicated. I'm going to need some time to explain it, and perhaps tell them what the system is. I'm going to first explain to you what it is. I'm going to familiarize you with this, just so they know what they're in for, and it sounds like a reasonable plan. Who can object to a reasonable plan? I'm sure there's somebody, but but I think that might calm people's their nerves and say, okay, this isn't going to be somebody who just goes on and on and on and doesn't have a plan. I think if you show them you have a plan, that instills a lot more confidence.
I think one of the points that we talked about too when we were discussing this session is that doing these presentations are almost practice for young professionals who are going to have to present to a board, citizen meeting. You go to a city council meeting, which those are the people who will object to a reasonable plan. Just saying, I heard that happens. Is that right, Andy, occasionally? But this is a way to practice to get that confidence, because that confidence is something you need in your day-to-day job. It's not just, oh boy, I get to go to the beach to a conference, I get to go to Denver to present to ITS Georgia or ITS America. It really is getting you out there, getting that practice, so then when you get out you have to present the findings of your report to a client, you have that confidence and that poise to get up and then be able to face any questions they have and be able to explain that stuff. So I think that's something else that employers need to think about is, you're not only helping train people to, get out there and, promote themselves. You're also helping them, getting more valuable people who can, you're not afraid that, oh, everybody else is on vacation and we got to send Bob. We want to make sure everybody's comfortable with making those speeches. Anything else? Anyone? Here we go. Now we're in trouble.
Great, guys, come on. Making presentations to a mixed crowd, like you mentioned with a council member and stuff like that, when you're bringing in technical information to somebody who doesn't have that kind of technical background, at what language level should you be writing to? I've heard like 6th grade level or, things like that. But it's important because when you're dealing with a mixed audience, getting that message across, because all of us in here that are engineers, we all know the $3, $5 words and things like that, but you lose your audience when that happens. And if you talk over the top of your audience, then they get frustrated and they don't hear you. So what do you recommend as a...
I'm not going to give you a grade level because I don't even know the answer to that. I've seen possibly every grade level out there that someone says that's the grade level. The issue at hand is learning a whole different set of skills, again, which I teach the students, which is communicating with a non-technical audience. So rather than looking at a grade level, I teach specific skills and what I call, I give students a tool set, so they learn how to use analogies, things like that. So it's more using these different tools of explaining technical things to a non-technical audience than worrying about what grade level you're talking about. Does that help?
Megan, let me add to that. I would say, if y'all know Marcia Anderson Bomar, she was probably the best at this because she could take the most complex information and she can explain it to the dumbest public people out there. And I was in awe of it, actually. I used to work for a long time, and she would take, people would have these, really long, complex, formulas for levels of service and all this stuff, and she'd get there in front of a public audience, and she would talk about how level service A is she wouldn't be able to take 2 sips of her coffee before she got to work, but at level service F is she could have 3 cups of coffee while she's driving. Things like that to try to explain the differences, and you go like, what? That doesn't make any sense. But taking things, basically take jargon completely out of your speaking. Don't use any jargon whatsoever if you're talking to people. Don't even talk to jargon with these people here, because nobody here wants to hear about that stuff either. So my recommendation is keep it really simple, whether it's 2nd grade, 4th grade, 6th grade, or city council, which is...
Get into a discussion here. One of the problems is that very often, professionals of any stripe, it doesn't have to just be engineers, they don't even recognize that certain words are jargon at all. I'm thinking of something, I do a unit with communicating with a non-technical audience in my graduate class, and it was I think she was a structural engineer, and there was a wire in this description, there was a cable that she said deformed and deflected. And I said, there's an easier word for you to use. It was, I was trying to get sag out of it, just the thing sags. And, her hackles went up, and she dug her heels in and said, deformation and deflection are not technical terms. Right, so there's an inherent problem if you don't even recognize that your language is too technical. That's where the problem starts, So there is an inherent built-in problem there.
Is that it? Okay. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate everybody. This is a great turnout for me in the last session of the day. I know there's other places you could have been, but you chose to be here. We really appreciate it. Let's thank our speakers one more time. For those of you who have an AICP registration, we have a sign-up sheet at the front that you can sign up and get some professional development hours. Thank you.